Conscient Podcast, episode 73. I'm with Judith Marcuse in West Vancouver, and it's October 24th, 2021. Listeners will remember that I promised to keep the episodes short, which I will, although there's so much we could talk about, Judith and I. We just had a conversation already. And also I'll get it out quickly so that this idea of we're in a moment, and then listeners can literally experience it either the same day or the day after. So anyway, Judith, nice to have a moment converse with you. I've wanted to talk to you for a long time about some of the issues that we share, interest in community-engaged arts and arts for social change. But I'll start with the theme that I've given myself this year, which is the idea of listening, but radical listening. What does that conjure in you, that idea of radical listening?
First of all, thanks, Claude, for the invitation. When you first mentioned radical listening, my first reaction was an image, and it was of a group of people standing around a piece of art that they've made collectively, talking about what it makes them think and feel, and engaging in dialogue as a consequence of that process of art making, and how profound that can be, and how that involves deep listening and looking, because we communicate physically as well on a very profound level. And thinking about all the processes that lead to that moment, which is a very important exchange in the field of art for social change, in the work that we do. Listening becomes absolutely at the core of the practice. Listening, participants who are the experts of their own lives, listening to other people who are the experts of their own lives, and also the kind of listening that has to be nurtured in the process of ASC, but also, very importantly, as facilitators, artists really need to be very present in these processes, but also be porous, so that you're paying attention, you're letting things in, and at the same time it moves through you into the next activities or actions or questions in those collective exchanges.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really good start to our conversation, but let's start at the beginning and have you tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do and some of the things. I know you're giving a presentation tomorrow on Arts for Social Change, so maybe you can give us a preview of some things you're going to talk about.
Okay. Well, the topic is so vast, isn't it? I come from a mainstream arts background. I was a student at the Royal Ballet School in the time of the Beatles, which was absolutely and led a double life in this Victorian hierarchical ballet school, and then the streets were and friends were, and it was a wonderful contrast. Come from a very activist family, an engineer father, electronics engineer, and my mother was a dance accompanist and wonderful pianist. So, and a very progressive family where we sat around the table and talked about things every night. Always meetings in our house. My mother was the official typist for many of those meetings. So I come from a fairly progressive background and had a long career. I'm 74, I'm old. I had a performance career starting off with Les Grands Ballets Canadiens in Montreal, excuse me, and then finishing, last company I worked with was Ballet Rambert Dance, now in London, which was a very happy place where the emphasis was on creation. And then came back to Canada, continued to be a choreographer, worked in a whole bunch of areas, and had a company, a dance company, had a solo and duo performing 5 years or so, 4 years, and then company for 14 years, repertory company. And then produced a bunch of festivals, multi-arts festivals, and then switched over about 22 years ago to the field of art for social change. Sorry for the long history, but I'm old.
No, it's
what
good
can
to know.
you do?
And you're very accomplished. But I know you most for that work, art and social change. How would you, you don't have to define it, but how would you explain it to somebody in terms of what your passion is in and around that area?
Okay. We define art for social change in our own particular way because there's so many versions of it. It's community engaged art making. So situations where groups of people get together to collectively create art about what really matters to them, the process facilitated by a specially trained professional artist. So there are so many ways to do this, so many forms, and it's happening all over the world. And it's growing despite everything that's happening. The pandemic has, I think, encouraged a lot of people to who've never looked at the field to actually think a bit more broadly about where they fit in to the larger context of their lives. And so we see all kinds of new projects happening around the world. The UK is the mother lode. Australia is very active. Parts of Africa are very active. There's a lot of work in India happening right now. So it is, it is a burgeoning sector of arts practice with its own unique goals, pedagogy, research, and so it is quite different in its own way, in its unique ways of doing this work. And when I think about social change, keep learning how vast, as I started off, this topic is. But one way I find useful to think about it is micro, so change that happens at an internal level, a personal level, meso, which is in your family, in your community, and macro, which is systems change. And they're all interconnected, like everything else is interconnected. And when I think about the role of art in social change, I also think about the interconnectedness of all forms of change. So as an example, in the health sector, many progressive health activists talk a lot about the social determinants of health, which simply mean the context within which people live, issues of poverty, of isolation, of the environment. So all of these condition how we are well or not well. And I think of art for social change as one element of wellness, potentially. So, for example, if people can't express themselves, it's possible that they'll become sick. That armor we were talking about earlier. When communities can't express themselves about what really matters to them, I think they lose a lot of their well-being. So that connectivity is lost, that attachment, one's own ontological security can be challenged. And so after 20 plus years of working in the field, I am totally convinced of the power of this kind of work to change how people see themselves in the act of creation, how they see themselves, how they see their relationships to the world around them, and how often they can see new perspectives, that assumptions can change when they are in an intimate situation with other people who do not usually self-identify as artists, but clearly, as Boal says, are the experts of their own lives. when that exchange happens as a consequence of creating something together, and in the process talking about why this color, why that movement, why that line of poetry. And in that exchange, what happens is dialogue. And so often this work is used in situations of conflict, where people simply, by blah, blah, blahing at each other, they just repeating themselves, and there's no third way. It's used in work with all kinds of challenged populations. It's also used in creating strategic plans for organizations. What matters to us, and how can we express it in new ways so that we can have a conversation about what matters to all of us. Where do we land together?
Including complex issues like climate change.
Absolutely. One of the programs we're doing now is a mentorship program which pairs mentors, senior artists with less experienced artists who work together, all ASC artists, because we're losing legacies fast and furiously as people retire. And the opportunities for learning about this kind of work is hard to find, and in some cases unaffordable. So we pair them together for 6 months, and they work together weekly. And then we have collective, it's a national program. We have a national meeting once a week, and the pandemic just proved how connective we can be online. And we pair those pairs with environmental organizations for 6-month residencies. And the goal is to create community-based activities that serve the agendas of that community and the same time of the organization doing change work on environmental issues. And it's been a joy and a surprise, actually.
Well, I'm going to take a little break here because I'm really into soundscapes, and I'm hearing the rain outside because we're in North Vancouver, and I biked up this morning, and I've been wanting to just poke the microphone out here for my listeners.
Why don't you come out here?
Yes.
Much louder here.
It's just so lovely because the greenery here, the rain is creating all kinds of subtle sounds, and of course the birds, and the relative quiet.
Very quiet here.
Sorry to interrupt your stream of thought there.
That's no problem.
Of course, the more we listen, the more we hear, right? But we can continue our conversation. I encourage people to take moments like that to
Great idea.
to notice where they are, right? Because we spend a lot of time in our heads and in our phones and but the real environment around us is so rich and constantly changing, right? Yeah. And that's part of my sort of Zen practice, is to be aware of these things.
And we're so lucky to be living here. We've lived here for 55 years, where we're surrounded by gorgeosity, as my mother used to say, and it always surprises me, or it sometimes surprises me, when friends and colleagues come from the East and they don't look, they don't see where they are. If you had come in on the highway, there's a vista that opens up that is down the Sound to mountains that have snow on them every year, and I'm astounded at how often people don't see it. So it's been very it's been learning about how to be here.
And I'm sure it affects your work and your worldview to come from this space and to have it as a sort of. But I'm wondering what you're going to talk about tomorrow. I see there's a piece of paper there. Are you specifically trying to address an issue that is on your mind these days, that kind of thing?
I've been thinking a lot about technology and mechanistic ways of being that
for better or for worse.
Increasingly for better or for worse. And how the integration of thinking and feeling is so integral to being present, and how we're, Descartes did us no favors, he separated the spirit and so been thinking a lot about education, especially arts education, and how quickly people, when given the opportunity to create about things that they're thinking or feeling, first you hear, "Oh, I'm not an artist. I can't do that." And then, just through offering little exercises and play and games and, a very light kind of approach where people really need to see each other in a process and listen to each other and even touch each other, move each other, how hungry so many people are to express themselves, to tell their stories, and to hear other people's stories. And how storytelling is such an important element of education, just to bring it round.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about data and facts. It's not about being a passive receiver. You're the teacher, I'm the student, my head is empty, your head is full, you dump it into my head and then I burp it back at you. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's an old methodology, but I'm surprised at how pervasive that sensibility about what learning is all about, what education is all about. And for me, I would love young people and adults to learn about listening, deep listening, about dialogic process, how to communicate with each other in ways that are respectful and productive, and not necessarily meditation practice, but reflective practices. How to stop, slow down, and think about things in a patient way and see what comes. And everything is so fast and mechanical and results oriented, and we live in a society where that becomes difficult unless encouraged.
Well, I mentioned to you earlier that I sometimes insert excerpts from other episodes. I think I'm going to insert an episode, an element from my conversation with Hildegard Westerkamp. Not the same one I've been playing, but a different one.
Great.
But it connects because you said you worked with her years ago.
Yes.
and just listening to the rainforest here in British Columbia, there's affinities between artists, right? Because artists who have been thinking about similar issues but have taken different paths. You work more in dance, you work more in sound, but they're all interconnected. And so we'll listen to a bit of Hildy right now.
That awareness of how we form relationships through sound, or how we can block them, I think is just as important. And it extends right into the ecological issues and into climate change. Like, what are we putting out there when we listen to our cities humming away? That's energy that's the voice of energy being overused, right? And can we just relate through our ears to what's happening out there. We can hear it. It's all there.
And having listened to Hildy, what I find interesting in all of your work, Judith, is this sense of bringing people together, right? Because you've done that in so many ways. I remember your efforts in working with the Government of Canada, which I think were what I call prescient, ahead of your time. It's coming now to be more of an area of focus, to realize that the arts need to be integrated with other sectors and health and that. But back then it was a strange idea, a good idea, but a strange one, because people, well, why would we do that? Well, because the arts flow in and out of those other sectors, right? Science doesn't make sense without art, and vice versa. Or life doesn't make sense. So I want to end with that idea of interconnection, and what's next for you, because you're giving lectures, you still run an organization, but what would you like to share, especially with young people, in terms of what you still want to accomplish, or and also the things that you'd like them to think about, to know, and to be to have on their radar as they move up, and as you start passing on knowledge all your life. But life will come to an end one day, and that happens, and then so what do we leave behind that's most useful for others? I know it's a big question.
It's huge. Wonderful question. There's a lot of cynicism in the world right now. There's a lot of hopelessness and despair, especially around issues of the environment, social conflict. And, in my work with young people, I worked for 20 years with 15 to 18-year-olds. There was a dichotomy. There were always kids who said, I don't have any role. My only role in life is, someone said this to me, as a consumer. And then there were other kids who said, yeah, the world is really horrible in many ways, but it's also very beautiful, and I think I can maybe make things a little better. I think finding a balance between those two sensibilities is critical for us all right now. We hear horrific levels of depression in young people right now. And I feel really at the base of myself that creating anything, art, sofas, whatever it is, allows us to give of ourselves to something that may not be lasting, but in the moment, that act of creation can engender hope, can engender a sense of autonomy, a sense of possibility. And we can't despair right now. We're at a tipping point, as everyone is saying. And the question for me is, how do we find the energy, alone and collectively, to keep moving in this urgency that we're all feeling without drowning in despair? And I think art has an essential role to play in that agenda.